What happens when science meets lifestyle in the fight against cancer? In this episode, we sit down with Dr. Julia Saylors, board certified in hematology, oncology, integrative medicine, and palliative care. She breaks down the latest research, explains how environmental toxins affect the body, and shares practical steps patients can take to build resilience through nutrition, movement, and mindfulness. This conversation is about more than medicine, it's about empowerment and learning how integrative oncology bridges evidence-based science with everyday living to create a more holistic path to healing. Let's chop it up. Dr. Julia Saylors, how you doing?
Great. That was a great intro. Thank you.
I have been looking forward to this whole week. And thank you so much. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with us today.
Happy to be.
Thank you. You know, I was I follow you on Instagram, and just your energy and the enthusiasm and compassion that jumps off the screen. I said, I have got to find this lady. I have got to interview her and talk to her. And so thank you for just being authentic. We need more of that.
You're welcome.
So who is Dr. Julia Saylors? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I'm a practicing oncologist. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. And, I've had an evolution of my practice over the last 15 years, but I went into medical oncology really just as I went through my training. I found myself drawn to the bedside, to really getting to know my patients, to also families are a big part of it. And so that was just always something that was meaningful to me. And during my course of med school, my grandmother was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so it was really my first experience kind of on the other side of it. And it wasn't a great experience. And of course, going through cancer treatment isn't what you want to hear, but it was very much an experience where it felt like she was being treated like a tumor, like her diagnosis. Didn't feel the medical team seeing her as a whole person. And of course, at that time, I'm in my early 20s. I don't have a lot of control over the situation, but what spoke to me was I want to be a different type of doctor. And that became kind of my goal. And so as I've gone through my training, continued to be drawn to those types of patients and decided to do medical oncology. Initially, in the start of my career, I actually kind of gravitated towards some of the end of life care, which is why I ended up going back and doing additional training to become hospice and palliative care board certified, and started a palliative care program at the hospital that I was working at, and really also just wanted to, as I was taking care of patients, there felt like an emptiness if there was a time when we had to transition to end of life care that I was just kind of abandoning in them. And so it was important to me to continue to be part of that if that was the trajectory of their course. And I continue to actually work within the hospice and palliative care setting. But within the last maybe 5 years or so, really patient driven were, people coming to me, what else can I do? Right? I mean, okay, you're telling me here's maybe the chemotherapy plan that I need or the surgery that I need, but there's got to be things out here that I can do in addition to help me feel better, to beat this. And to be honest, you don't learn that in medical school.
That's right.
And in our training.
That's right.
And, you learn about how to diagnose something and you learn about how to treat it. And, of course, by the time people get to me, they generally have a diagnosis of cancer. But, as I was, thinking through what patients were bringing to me, I knew that I wanted to be better for them to learn these things. And that's where the integrative medicine aspect came in. And the more I learned about it, and I did a 2-year fellowship, that's really become my passion. And even more kind of going more into prevention of cancer at this point. If I can leave an impact through some of the things that I'm doing on social media, it really is to how can we not have so many people walking into my office?
I call it angel work. We need more people doing this type of work. I think in life, some people get to choose and others are chosen. It seemed like you are one of those chosen ones. When you hear the words you have cancer, that's something that you can't unhear. And when I heard those words, it kind of changed my entire life. And so you seeing your grandmother go through those things. So let's rewind.
Okay.
We have this saying in here in the South, in
Mhm.
churches when preachers are preaching, they say you're getting all into my message and my stuff. So you're
Mhm.
getting all into the stuff. So let's rewind a little bit.
Okay. You
Yeah. Let's rewind. Growing up, you're a South Carolina girl by birth.
Yes. I grew up primarily in Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle
Graduated
Beach.
from high school in Myrtle Beach High School, and then left and went to Clemson for my undergraduate. So
Did you?
I'm an avid Tigers fan through
Yeah,
thick
yeah.
and thin.
So growing up, and we have the young Julia, was
Mhm.
medicine always on your mind, or you just was going through life like typical student, teenager, just transitioning and not knowing what you wanted to do?
No, I mean, probably at a very young age, I declared I'm going to be a doctor. And I think it was just because I loved science. I loved how the body worked. I was always a good student, but that was what I had fun learning about. And so I do recall at a very early age kind of declaring that. And so even when I went into undergraduate, I did a BS in biology and a BS in psychology because, again, I guess I've always had that element of mind and body. And
Hmm.
so it just kind of made sense to me. But I had the trajectory of medical school from the very start.
Interesting fact, when I went to NC State, I double majored as well. I started out in aerospace engineering and I did pre-med zoology. Then I
Hmm.
got out of aerospace and went into civil and stuck with the pre-med. And I wanted to be a doctor as well, but just the engineering and the money kind of kicked in and poof, I was
Yeah.
doing something else. But kudos to you for pursuing that dream. And so you're growing up as a child, and when you heard the words cancer for the first time and you experienced that, how did that make you feel? Was it more of, I'm going to do this because I saw what it did to my grandmom, or you knew you wanted to go to medical school, but not necessarily oncology?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to go to medical school, and I spent the first 2 years, you're primarily in the classroom, just kind of absorbing it all. Like I said, a lot of it's learning how to diagnose things, and then you start to learn how to treat things. And then in your third year of medical school, you pretty much have to do a 6 to 8 week block of all of the different core areas. So general surgery, psychiatry, pediatrics, and then internal medicine. And you start to think about, do I want to treat kids or do I want to treat adults? Do I want to
Hmm.
be doing procedures? Or am I more oriented towards being in a clinic? And you kind of think through those things. And every rotation, I truly was drawn to the bedside of patients and I wanted to know their life story. And so when I decided what I was going to do, it was very clear to me that I needed to be with adults and not children.
Hmm.
Seeing sick children is just a whole different level of, difficulty. But
Yes.
so when I went into internal medicine, which is what you generally go into if you're going to treat adults, and you can go into cardiology, you can do pulmonology, endocrinology, but that's what is the stepping stone to all of the different other specialties, including oncology. My very first day of my internship, I showed up and I was handed a list of 25 patients that all had leukemia. So I did my training at the University of Alabama
Hmm.
at Birmingham. I'm not an Alabama fan,
Hmm.
but I loved training there. It was
Yeah.
amazing. But in my very first day, I showed up and it was like, you have 25, and they didn't even know that I wanted to do necessarily oncology, but it was just what I was assigned to, the hematology wards. And pretty much everybody in the state of Alabama, if you get an acute leukemia, which is a very serious illness and typically it requires patients to be treated in the hospital,
Yeah.
and most of those patients, when they come into the hospital, are there for weeks often. So you really get to know them. And that's where it started for me. And I tried to go into every rotation, my GI rotation, my cardiology rotation, whatever, with an open mind of like, maybe this is what I want to do. And it just never wavered. And so I just, I think this was just what I was destined to do.
There is a trust that comes with a relationship between you and your oncologist because you, number one, they are the expert and you are lending everything in you to them, your faith and your belief and your hope. And I think it takes a special kind of doctor to understand and still, look at the humanity side of that patient sitting there.
Mhm.
Sometimes that can go unwanted, but I sense that in you, it is not. When we trust you guys, we trust that you're going to make the best decisions for us like you would your own.
Mhm.
And how do you manage that? Like I speak about pouring out into others. You pour out so much into others. You
Mhm.
taking on that weight. You're carrying that weight for them. How does Julia manage that? There
Yeah.
has to be times where you have to just get poured into as well.
I do think that in order to go into a field like oncology, you have to have some ability to compartmentalize things. But the way I approach it when I walk into my office every day, when I walk into the exam room with a patient, I try and remove all distractions. I know that this is their time. And so what they want to discuss, and, sometimes you don't get all the time you want, but I try and give them whatever time that they need. And in that moment, I'm not thinking about my to-do list or what else is going on. I don't take my phone in there. I don't even take my computer. I mean, you sometimes have doctors that are sitting there charting while somebody's talking. I don't do
Yep.
any of that. I
Mm-hmm.
always make sure that I sit down to try and get at eye level. And I want them to know that this is their time with me. So, that's kind of when I'm in the room with them, I try and be fully in the room with them. And then when I leave work, I usually have certain things that I do to maybe decompress, if you will. A lot of times for me, it's music. Sometimes it will be, listening to a podcast or a book as well. But I have that time. And then when I walk in the door, it's my goal, as best as I can, I'm not perfect, to be present for my family. And I have 3 kids. They hear the word cancer a lot. I talk to
Mm-hmm.
them sometimes about patients. And I let them know if I'm having a day where there was more struggles or somebody that I'm concerned about, or if something's weighing on me. My kids are older now.
Mm-hmm.
So one's 17, one's 15, one's 11. So I am able to have a little more of those kinds of conversations. But at the same time, I do try and when I get home, be home.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's impossible to not always worry about patients, but I usually step back into that role the next day.
Yeah, you're standing in the gap. My team, I love my team at UNC, and I'm like you, I hate Carolina with everything in my body, but I love my team at UNC.
Mhm.
And, it's almost like you are somewhat of a unicorn. I go to the hospital and I tell my doctor, hey, I'm taking mushrooms and I'm doing burdock root and wormwood and I'm doing all these other things, right? Clearly,
Mhm.
you know what that is. And she just leaves me alone. It's like I'm speaking a foreign language,
Yeah.
you know, but you being somewhat of a unicorn, how in the world did you go from the commercial side of this to integrative medicine? How did that happen for you?
I mean, it really was. I can't say that there was like one specific patient, but just the collective of patients that were seeking outside things. And as I mentioned, would come in and say, what else can I do?
Hmm.
And I didn't like the answer of, I don't really know. And so as, you know, uh, initially as people would bring things to me, okay, this is a supplement that I may want to take, or what do you think about this diet, or what should I not eat, or what should I eat? I knew that I needed the formal training and really wanted to delve into that aspect of cancer care. I became an expert in designing what the treatment plan was, and here's the chemotherapy that you need, but that was missing from how I was approaching patients. And so, that's what I bring to my practice now. Not every patient is necessarily interested in that. You know, a lot of people now seek me out because they know that I want to have those conversations, but there's still a big gap in kind of explaining how important lifestyle is
Hmm.
and all the things that go along with that and the other things that you can do to help, whether it be during cancer treatment or to improve your chance of survivorship after cancer treatment.
Yes, yes. You have to do all that you can. My doctor says all the time, Tony, if I could get people to do all the stuff that you're doing, we would have a lot higher success rate. I constantly exercise and I detox my body and don't really do a lot of sugar and all these things, to do whatever I need to do to combat. My story is I was diagnosed with T histiocyte rich diffused and been dealing with that for 4 years. But then the underlying cause we found out was Hodgkin's lymphoma, which kind of
Hmm.
masks itself as that. So I'm dealing with
Hmm.
Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's.
Right.
So, but that doesn't change the fact that with a blood cancer, I feel like you have to do everything that you can to give yourself a fighting chance. And I
Yeah.
appreciate, your type of work that you look at both sides.
Mhm.
And mostly the thing that I find important is you listen, and your listening causes you to seek something out to make you a better practitioner. That is commendable. So thank
Mhm.
you for that. So how has that shaped your philosophy on care as a whole?
Well, I think that I've probably always been a person that realized the importance of not just the body, but the mind and the spirit. But now it's really more formalized in how I practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really shaped how I approach patients. To, like you said, some of it's just listening, like what's going on? What am I hearing from them? How are they suffering in some way? And not necessarily just always being so disease focused, but what else is going on that, the stress in their life. And so how can we address what I think is all of the facets? So it's a more whole person approach.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's it's really kind of how I approach it all.
So when we talk about holistic, for our listeners out here, define that term. What does that mean? I'm sure they're saying, well, what is holistic? We hear it about holistic food, holistic medicine. What is holistic?
Yeah. I mean, I think holistic medicine truly is looking at the whole person and addressing all of the aspects. But really, when you start talking about beyond just treating the body or the disease, if you will, it is looking at the different mind body techniques, movement, nutrition, all of that kind of falls under holistic medicine. I think there is some confusion about the different terminology that is used because some people will say holistic medicine, you'll hear integrative medicine, you'll hear
Mm-hmm.
complementary medicine, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
hear alternative medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
those aren't all the same. Now, there may be some overlap in, if somebody is doing some type of detoxification program, you could call that an alternative thing or a complementary thing or integrative thing, but there is differences in the definition. And so for me, for my practice as an integrative oncologist, really integrative oncologists are about combining the best of conventional treatment
Mm-hmm.
with the best of holistic treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And in hopes that, and really what the data would say is you get the best outcomes when you're approaching it from both sides of things. It is not about just doing alternative things. And certainly our goal is it to not just be focused on the conventional things, which is how most of us are trained as
Mm-hmm.
oncologists. But I think there's really more and more growing interest in the integrative practices. I know where I did fellowship, they're continuing to have a lot of people come into their programs. And I just attended a conference. I got back yesterday
Mm-hmm.
from Society for Integrative Oncology in Boston. It was at Dana-Farber. There
Mm-hmm.
were minds from all over the world. There were over 400 attendees of all people that are interested in integrative oncology. And so I know that this is going to continue to grow, and I hope becomes mainstream and something that's available to any cancer patient going through treatment.
Have you faced any resistance from your peers regarding this type
Absolutely.
of
I
approach?
mean, I think that I believe that the vast majority of physicians have the best of intentions, and we go into this field because we truly want to take care of patients. So it's not, I don't know if it's mostly resistance, or I would say a lot of people seem indifferent to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of, if you don't know something, the default would be to, probably, I don't know, shy away from it or just, but yeah. So, but there are certainly some people that would say, oh, well, that's snake oil or whatever it may
Right.
be, or like, that's a waste of your time without really kind of even taking the time to see, oh, there actually may be some data about this.
Yeah.
And, a lot of what we do in integrative medicine, I'm not going to say everything is perfectly safe,
Right.
but, a lot of it has, good, at least safety data. And so if something is safe and may also be beneficial, in my mind, it's like, why downplay it or why brush it to the side? But yeah, resistance, I would say probably just more from lack of awareness.
There's a lot of mistrust in medicine. We have a broad audience, urban and rural, and in the African American and brown populations, going all the way back to Tuskegee, Henrietta Lacks,
Hmm.
those situations.
Yep.
That
Hmm.
mistrust is so great. How do you have that first conversation with someone that's being diagnosed and how do you address those kinds of fears if you have those?
It is very challenging, and I completely understand where the mistrust comes from. You know,
Mhm.
it's not there's not one particular reason. It could be how media portrays certain things. It
Yeah.
certainly can be how, well, I mean, you can just take COVID and that whole situation as a
Mhm.
prime example. And I think that that really did exponentially escalate mistrust in the medical community.
Mhm.
I hate that it maybe filtered down on the doctors that were practicing taking care of those patients, because believe me, it was challenging for us as well. And knowing what the right thing to do was, is that, a situation is coming at you so quick with a brand new disease that you've never seen. And do you get the vaccine? Do you not? And it's just not an easy, and there's mistrust because on a national level, on a government level, there probably was information that wasn't getting disseminated
Right.
as well or as quickly as it should, even to the physicians on the ground. So I do have to deal with that. A lot of patients are very skeptical when you're prescribing a drug. Is it for financial benefit? And that, obviously that is something that, I mean, for me, I could never imagine choosing a treatment for somebody because it made me money, but I can understand why people would think that that could be happening. I'm not going to say that medicine is a business. To me, a lot of that lies in the responsibility of the insurance companies more so than that are beholden to stockholders. And we could go on a whole
Mhm.
podcast about
That is a whole
that.
nother story.
And therefore, they're, rightfully so, people should question. And in certain situations, what I encounter is more of a treatment that I think is the best option for my patient, and insurance denying it or
Mhm.
puts up a lot of roadblocks and hurdles for something that really, in my mind, sometimes is almost like it makes me lose sleep sometimes. Some of the subpar care that I'm being told to.
Yes.
And looking at what I do as integrative medicine, the biggest challenge that I encounter is how do I get access to my patients? Because
Yes.
insurance covers sick care. They
Yes.
are not in the business of preventive care. And I think it's the
Right.
nature of our insurance setup, which they care about each quarter, right? What are their, when they're telling their stockholders their profits and all of that, it just matters each quarter. And they're not like, well, how is this person going to be 10 and 20 years from now? I think that if we could shift our whole model to really focusing our dollars on preventive care, prevent these chronic diseases, but
Yes.
instead you can't get I mean, it's hard for me to even get a nutritionist and insurances don't cover it.
That's right.
So you have a system right now that's set up that only people with the means can even access these things. And to me, it's like,
Mhm.
gosh, if we could
Yeah.
prevent, we would save. So, I mean, the dollars that we spend on healthcare with sick care is just phenomenal. But
Mhm.
yeah, anyways.
You're dropping so many nuggets here. My mind is racing with so many questions. You're right. It's the access, number one. And every day, I wonder if it's going to be the last day that the insurance companies say yes, even though I'm on the hook for a bunch of it. I've had CAR T therapy as well. And I think I had that in 2022. And at that time, it was
Wow.
$1.5 million.
Hmm.
Right. And it's almost like I go, and when I go, I'm sitting in a room with people that I know may not have the best insurance like I have or access. And you wonder, like, man, what is the why here? Is the why really to make people whole, or is the why financial, And then you brought up a good point about COVID. And I get this question all the time when I speak abroad. And it's like, and this may be myth, but
Hmm.
people know what they hear about COVID, and they know that it has something to do with the mitochondria, right? They're kind of piecing what all this means. But have you seen the rise in not just cancer, but the different types of rare cancers that's popping up? And is there some kind of correlation that we can link back to maybe the COVID vaccine doing any of this? Because I get asked that question all the time.
Yeah. I don't want to state anything as fact. I have absolutely
Right.
seen the data presented that certain cancers we started diagnosing in a lot higher numbers in the setting of the whole COVID epidemic.
Mhm.
GI cancers, for example, pancreatic cancers, biliary cancers. I mean, I'm trying to recall this graph that was shown to me a few years back, but without a doubt, there's something there. Now,
Mhm.
I think that you've got COVID, the disease, and then you've got the treatments that we had, including vaccines. And there were issues on both sides, right? And so COVID caused a lot of inflammation in the body.
Yes.
And inflammation is one of cancer's favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and many other chronic diseases, I mean, that have come out of all of that inflammation that occurred. But you also had a vaccine that may have helped people from a standpoint of getting through COVID. I mean, we'll never really know how many more people would have died had they not gotten the vaccine. But
Right.
also, as a hematologist, I did see situations where patients develop blood clots and strokes. And in the beginning, it was like, oh, well, I don't know, is this the vaccine? And I just don't think that we got the information fast enough to be able to present to people the risk benefit. But
Mm-hmm.
we know now there were certainly safety issues. Now, I don't know that I have seen data to suggest that necessarily it caused cancer, but certainly some other maybe cardiovascular sick that might have increased. But again, it's especially in a situation like that, you're kind of weighing risk and benefit. And that's often a conversation I have with patients about their cancer diagnosis, because I get it. They're skeptical about chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Chemotherapy can do harmful things to the body,
Yes.
but you're looking at a diagnosis. And so I completely understand when somebody says to me, well, I don't want to do chemo because it could affect my heart or it can affect my immune system. And those
Yes.
are absolutely true things. But for example, somebody who has your diagnosis, I mean, the disease is there now, right? And so this is the tool that we have to hopefully give you your best chance at cure and
Yeah.
long-term remission.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what integrative oncology does is to help kind of minimize the side effects from the treatment,
Yes.
and of course the side effects from the disease as well. But a lot of what I talk about is, okay, what can we do? Because this is a treatment that you need for this cancer. And I know it has side effects. I know it can cause neuropathy. I
Yes.
know that it can weaken your immune system. So
Yes.
how do we make it such that those are less of an issue both through the treatment and then once you're done with treatment?
I wish I
But
had you in my diagnosis. I had R-CHOP and it was terrible.
mm-hmm,
You know, the neuropathy, and I would be the brain fog,
mm-hmm,
loss of balance. You know, I
right.
wish I knew and had someone like you to discuss these type things, which is leading me. I mean, you're talking about my next question. What guides you in your decision making between aggressive, treatment and prioritizing someone's quality of life?
Right.
Yeah.
So the way I approach it with my patients is I let them know from the beginning that this is a discussion between the two of us. And most of the time, if I have a strong bias towards something, I'm going to say, this is my medical opinion of what you should do. But
Mhm.
I always present the options. And sometimes there's some gray zone and the answer is not always black and white. So then it's a, what do you want my goals to be? And
Mhm.
so I mean, I had this discussion yesterday with a gentleman I was giving him his diagnosis of cancer, and he has a pretty aggressive type of cancer that we call cholangiocarcinoma. So it's of the
Mhm.
bile ducts.
Mhm.
And he's older, he's in his 70s. And so what I present to him is, here's what we can do. Here's the best treatments that we have available, but I need to know what your goals are.
Mhm.
And it's also reasonable to recognize, particularly when you have in a situation of a very aggressive cancer, that probably the best that I'm going to be able to do is help him live longer and hopefully keep his quality of life for as long as possible. But I think the patient goals, I mean, some people come in and I want to do every possible thing that I can do no matter what. And then you have other people that really say, I just want to spend my time with my family. And then most people are somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But that's what I try and establish is, what is it that the patient wants more so than what, I want, for them. And most of the time families are part of this discussion. I always try and involve families um, when I can. But yeah, that's kind of how I generally approach it from the beginning, is to understand what their goals are and then present what I think the best options are to meet those.
Can you tell us about a moment where you were most impacted by a patient? I mean, telling someone, I mean, you're like the Grim Reaper, right? Telling them you have cancer, because on that other end, you're like, you're just taken back. But can you describe to us from your angle? I know it's tough for you every day to have to deal
Mhm.
in this space. Has a patient impacted you or a patient impact? Can you walk us through that? That kind of moment?
Yeah, I do, because I have somebody that right now that it's one of the hardest situations that I've encountered. I met her 6 years ago. She, at the time, was 36 and she was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. That was initially, once it was discovered, it had already metastasized to several parts of her body. And so, in meeting, she's the sweetest person ever, a mom with a young child. And, in meeting her, most of the time when somebody walks in my exam room, I know if our goals are, I'm going to be trying to help them be cured of their cancer or help them live as long as possible and as well as possible with their cancer. Or I know that there's no possibility of that. But, with her, I knew that there was going to be a point in which I was going to have to help her through the end of life.
Yeah.
And we literally, about 2 weeks ago, that conversation had to happen. I wanted it to be so many more years from now. We got her through 6 years, and she wrote me a card and said to me, and I wrote it down because I just wanted to share this message in this podcast because it's so amazing.
Thank you for being so open.
She said, may your lives continue to be enriched from healing and empowering patients to live a full life despite their diagnosis. She said that to me, and she's the person that is going to pass away soon. When I told her that it was time to go home and spend time with her family and to get on hospice, she looked at me and said, "Are you okay?"
It's heavy.
Right. And I'm like, I mean, not really. In that moment, I had trouble even breathing, but what an amazing person to look at me and say, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Keep smiling for your patients." She will forever be with me. And, there's a part of me that's like, "God, I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have done more." It's not fair, right? But she will always inspire me to continue to be better for my patients and just a better person.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is so powerful, so emotional, and we appreciate you for sharing that. That's hard for me to even hear that and listen. It's just, this is tough. Cancer is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And it is known to kill you. And it's a it's almost like doing time and you don't know when your time is up. And I respect and admire you for just connecting, because so many doctors, Dr. Saylor, don't connect like that. And the patient can tell, and you already feel alone, but you even feel more alone if you're not resonating with your care team,
Mm-hmm.
And so keep that. Don't let that go,
Mm-hmm.
keep that. Let's change the subject here. Let's take
Okay.
a deep breath. Let's talk about microplastics.
Okay.
Now, I'm pretty sure everybody has a lot of touch with plastics. And so
Yes.
we're talking about microplastics. So get on us. Let us know what to do, what not to do, and what is it.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of backing up a little bit, question that I get often is, why are so many people getting cancer? Especially, why are we seeing it in so many younger people? And I think, granted, it's not just one thing, but I would say it's largely the environment that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Most cancers aren't genetic. Probably 5 to 10% of cancers you can kind of tie back to some genes that somebody maybe was born with that would predispose them to developing cancer. But most of it is related to various things that we are exposed to in our environment. And in 2025, almost 2026, the exposure starts now, before you're even born. A lot of people say to me, well, my grandmother, who's 90, didn't live that kind of lifestyle that you're trying to promote. I'm like, well, guess what? For the first 50 years of her life, she didn't have highly processed foods. Things weren't packaged in plastic. And so,
That's
not
right.
to say that there weren't some exposures, but I mean, McDonald's isn't even that old, and Doritos aren't even that old. But specifically, microplastics, I think, just represent one of the environmental toxins that we are inundated with now, with how our what's in our water supply, how our food is packaged, how we cook things. Plastics have largely made things cheaper and more accessible. And so now it's everywhere. And so we have evidence to show that from our exposure to microplastics in our food and our water and our air and all of that, it accumulates in our tissues, and our body doesn't have a good mechanism for detoxing. Now, there are lifestyle things that we can consider doing, and that's where a lot of integrative oncology or integrative medicine is looking at how, to get rid of those things. But I mean, what I hope is that once people hear about microplastics, which microplastics lead to inflammation
Mm-hmm.
and oxidative stress,
Mm-hmm.
and also we call them hormone disruptors or
Mm-hmm.
hormone mimickers.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are really the reasons why we believe they increase the risk for cancer and other chronic diseases. Was there another part of the question that I
Yeah,
haven't answered yet?
the other part is, so we're living in these, a lot of people live in these food deserts and
Yeah.
places. How do you help patients navigate this? They don't have the resources to eat as properly as they think they do anyway. So they probably need help with even going to the Walmart or somewhere to eat the best they can. But
Mhm.
and they store their food. You remember growing up, you would have these the butter that was in the little butter container. Our parents and grandparents didn't throw away anything. They always repackaged stuff in this plastic.
Mhm.
And so how do you help patients navigate that? What can they do? Some simple things they can do to try to start navigating in this type of environment.
Yeah. I would say, as far as reducing microplastics, the two biggest things that could be done to reduce your exposure would be not drinking out of a plastic container when possible, carrying a reusable stainless steel container, which, you can find those generally, they're not terribly expensive. It's really about heating things in plastic. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you look at a plastic water bottle that's been transported as it goes into the trucks and then it goes into storage, it's constantly being heated. And so when they test the water within your plastic water bottles, amongst the highest concentration of microplastics. So, again, if you're at a sporting event and it's 90 degrees outside and all you have access to is that, I don't think that it has to be like complete elimination. But in your daily, don't get, a big bottle of, I mean, it's cheap. It's $3 and you can get probably 24 of those plastic water bottles, but then
Mm-hmm.
people store them in their garage and
Mm-hmm.
then they put them in their car. And
Yeah.
that's just constant process for the heating. Instead, what I try and do, what I do in my personal life and for my family, is we just have water bottles around. And then, you don't have to have a whole house water filtration system. I don't think that's accessible for most people, but there are now little filters that you can install onto just the sink, like the one sink in your house that maybe is what you're using for your drinking water. And just filtering the water would be kind of the other thing that I would say. Your drinking water
Mm-hmm.
would be another, first place to start. And then, as far as, everybody probably has some form of storage containers at their house for their food, but just getting rid of the plastic containers, but definitely not heating in anything plastic. And
Mm-hmm.
that includes when you're buying stuff from the store that comes in um, you know, the plastic bags. Take it out of that and heat it on, a ceramic plate or something.
Makes
But those are kind of things that I would say it's not expensive to remove it from those things, and hopefully would be accessible to most people.
So we're in this food desert. We're going into the Walmart because everybody has that.
Mhm.
Once they get in there, how can they exhibit good shopping practices when selecting their foods?
So, I mean, I think I do a lot of my shopping at Sam's and Costco, primarily Costco because that's what's close to me.
Mhm.
I am happy to see more and more options, buying in bulk. So that makes it, more cost effective, that are maybe organic. But I know that that's a challenge. And, you look at the cost of your apple that's not organic versus your apple that is, or your eggs that are. I mean, that's hard to always justify that increased cost. But I do think that there are, ways to, like I said, buying in bulk. We
Mm-hmm.
have a local farmers market that I try and support. I don't know in rural communities if they have those kinds of programs where you can get like fresh fruits and vegetables that come from some of the surrounding farmers.
Like a
I do,
co-op. Yeah.
yes, like a co-op. I mean, I try
Mhm.
and support locally as much as I can as well. So those are some of the things that I use. I actually use on a weekly basis something called Misfit Market. I don't know if you've heard of Misfit
I've
Market.
never heard of that.
Lovely, I love it. But they basically take from farms all around the U.S. and it's basically they're foods that maybe it may not be a very beautiful eggplant, so they didn't put it in the store,
Mm.
but a lot of it is organic, and every week I can get whatever's in season shipped to me, and I find it to be much less expensive. I can get when blueberries are in season, I can get container of blueberries for a fraction of the cost. So, I mean, those are just the things that I've found to even keep my budget in check. But I'm super sensitive to access and affordability. And, you know, especially with things that are going on now in the government and the thought that some people might lose access, children might lose access to food right now. It's just like, when I do post things on my social media that are really trying to get people to make choices that are healthier, I certainly hear a lot of the crowd saying, but
Yes.
we can't afford that.
Can't afford
And
that.
I hate that. On one hand, I'm like, well, I can't stop promoting what I want when people go into the store is if they're looking at the cereal boxes, they're going to go for the brand one that doesn't have the artificial colors and the added sugar
That's right.
that shouldn't be substantially different in price. So to me, but I realize that some people perceive it as, oh, well, you're not in touch with the real world. And I definitely try to be. I wish I had the solutions, but I don't.
No, I have a lot of friends that manage various grocery stores and Targets and stuff, and I speak to them all the time, and they're saying you can tell the state of the economy by people's eating habits. And so, for example, he was telling me, what is that stuff, that fake meat, spam?
Mm-hmm.
Like the sales on spam is up.
Yeah.
The sales on the ramen oodles of noodles, all those cheap type foods, they are bringing more and more of that into the store, and the sales are going through the roof because that's what people are buying.
Right.
The fake steakums and these things, because people are still trying to say, I have to eat something, but
Mm.
this is going to play long term in your health by eating that. And so
Absolutely.
I totally understand what you're saying. And
Yeah.
I can see the comments where people saying, well, she's in a different reality, but no, it has to be some sacrifices, right? For your health and for the choices that you make, has to be trade-offs. And that's all you're talking about. Dr. Saylors, have there ever been a point where you said to yourself, this is enough? Have you ever doubted the work that you're doing and said that I can't do this anymore?
I don't think so.
Good. That's a good answer.
So far, no. I loved my training. It was 2 a.m. and you're like in the thick of everything. So far, it continues to be a rewarding field. I mean, I do see myself as like a lifelong student, kind of what's the next chapter for me. And so my practice has had to evolve and I think as I go really more into this realm of integrative oncology, that's kind of what I see my future. I love it. But I guess, yeah, what has shifted is more my focus on, prevention and not just treating diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So I may scale back some in the office to try and focus on some of the other things that I hope can reach a larger audience and make a bigger impact.
My son is a sophomore at NC State. He's majoring in agricultural biological engineering, and he interned at UNC hospitals this summer in the ER. He dabbling, maybe want to go to medical school. He wants to be a neurosurgeon, but he's
Mhm.
now looking at oncology, and I think that's because of me,
Mhm.
like you with your grandma. And so, what advice would you give future oncologists, or you may even have interns? What advice do you give them when entering this type of work?
Yeah. Well, your son could be a neuro-oncologist, which is a great field in itself
Wow.
and really still needs a lot of progress.
Mhm.
That's oncologists that are primarily dealing with brain tumors and, other like CNS tumors, but that's a
Mhm.
sidebar.
Mhm.
When I started my training, our work week was regulated to be 120.
Yeesh.
It was probably because I did, 6 years in total residency and fellowship. It's probably about my third or fourth year when they decided to lower the work week to 80 hours.
Hmm.
Wow, what a
Oh,
break.
that's even better,
Now
right?
you only have to work now you only have to work 80 hours. But I say all that to say that burnout is easy to happen or quick to happen if you don't take time to also take care of yourself. And so, I hope that people continue to go into medicine. And I do think some changes have come about to promote wellness amongst people in training. When people ask me, because I've certainly met doctors who say, I would never encourage somebody to go into medicine now. Understand that sentiment to some level, but yet I tell people, like, I love what I do. I truly can't imagine myself doing anything else. So, yes, you still need to find the balance of having time with your family and taking care of yourself. And those need to be made priorities because that's how you show up as your best self for your patients.
Hmm.
And I think it's when people don't do those things and just feel all consumed by work that they lose the passion for what we're doing. But I hope people
Yeah,
will continue to stay in medicine. We need great, compassionate, and smart doctors still to
I
take care of everybody.
I second that. If you could change one thing about cancer care, what would it be?
I would love for patients to be able to walk into a clinic and have access to a dietitian, to a massage therapist,
Mm,
to yoga classes or meditation classes. I would love it if in my chemotherapy suite, I had stationary bikes. If somebody wanted to ride a stationary bike while they were getting their chemotherapy, I
hmm.
would love all of the things that we know that can help patients as they go through their treatment. Cryotherapy, for example, is
Hmm.
something which is basically cold therapy and their mitts and hats and different things,
Hmm.
but those aren't something that patients have accessible to them. So, that's what I would love to see happen. How I get to that point, I don't know yet. I haven't
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
figured all of that out, but
yeah, yeah.
I'm also just super excited about what I see in the conventional side. We haven't talked a lot about, the conventional treatments that I do as an oncologist,
Hmm.
but we certainly, when I started practice 15 years ago, it was a kind of a throw the kitchen sink. Everybody with breast cancer got chemo, you got more aggressive surgeries, and I really see now the focus being what I call de-escalation of therapy. So, whereas it used to be that patients with breast cancer would often get 30 treatments, now it's sometimes as few as 5. And
Huh.
we know that that's just as good. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that's for everybody, but I'm saying
Yeah.
that's the movement that I see. And we also have more personalized medicine as opposed to doing a lung biopsy and saying, you have non-small cell lung cancer and everybody gets the same chemo. It is a totally different world. Chemo may not even be part of a lung cancer treatment now.
You're right.
And
You're
I
right.
love that. I
I
love
love
when I
that.
have those opportunities and it's not infrequent. Where, immunotherapies as you experience with getting CAR T therapy, um, us figuring out ways to harness the immune system to fight cancer just continues to get better and better. So we are doing less of the harsher, more aggressive treatments often, more targeted treatments. Um, and so that excites me about where I see the field going. We're also, the technology is there, it's got to be made affordable and more accessible, but to be able to do a blood test and potentially that diagnose patients with cancer without all of the potentially invasive or risky
Yeah.
types of procedures. I now do regularly, probably multiple times a day. I do what's called a liquid biopsy, which is just taking blood to
Hmm.
look for tumor DNA or tumor cells in the blood that can tell me about somebody's cancer without having to do an actual biopsy. Now, I'm not saying that patients, biopsies are often necessary, but the technology just continues to get better and better, that I think we're not far away from a world where you're going to go into your primary care doctor and get a lot of these tests. And hopefully, we know the earlier you diagnose a cancer, generally, the better the
Hmm.
outcome is going to be and potentially the less treatment that somebody is going to need. So it's
Yeah.
there, it's coming. It's not necessarily, mainstream yet. But we're learning how to incorporate it in our practice. And I think it's going to be here. It takes a little time.
It's exciting. It's exciting to see how that front line, like you said, the other alternatives are moving up and it's not just chemo first, but it might be some bispecifics or some other type stuff.
Yep.
So you are 100% spot on. You want to do a quick rapid fire? All right, so let's lighten this up. What's a recent book or article or study that has challenged the way that you think?
So, well, because you had told me a couple rapid fire questions, I thought about what I wanted to present to you. This is a book that I'm getting ready to start.
What you got?
It's called The Book of Alchemy. So I don't know if you've heard of Suleika Jude. She is married to John Baptiste. Do you know who he is?
I know John Baptiste.
Okay.
I love his music.
He's amazing.
That's my
She's
guy.
more amazing.
Yeah, I know his wife. Yeah.
Okay. So she started out when she was diagnosed with leukemia, and she wrote a column in the New York Times, and it was called Life Interrupted. And it was basically talking about a young person and they got diagnosed with cancer and how their life came to a screeching halt as they knew it. And I think that every cancer patient goes through there's life before you hear you have cancer, and then during the treatment, and then when you're done with treatment and like the survivorship, but you're never the same.
That's right.
But you can certainly, not that anybody wishes that they are glad they went through it, but you can grow from it, probably as you have greatly grown from what you experienced. But anyways, so she wrote a book called Between Two Kingdoms, and it is really defining that before cancer and then after cancer and what she did when she was initially diagnosed with leukemia. The book is amazing for patients with cancer, but even more amazing almost for caregivers of patients who sometimes get not ignored, but they're going through this journey as well. So Between Two Kingdoms is probably one of my favorite books. I made all my team at work read it, and I love her. And so she's, I think impacted me greatly. One day maybe I'll get to meet her. But this is the book that I'm getting ready to start that she just recently came out with a few months ago. And it's a guide to journaling and kind of using that as a meditative to answer some of the more meaningful questions of life. So, as you go through it, she brings up different topics and then kind of guides you in how to journal and I think kind of grow as a person. So that's my book.
I love that. The Book of Alchemy. You guys heard it here. And
but I would start with Between Two Kingdoms. If you're going to read a book of hers, you'll probably devour it in a very short period of time.
I'm going to check out my Audible and see if I can pluck it today and listen to that. So one daily habit that keeps you grounded.
Exercise.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I have a pretty set routine that I do, but I used to be a morning exerciser when my kids were little. I needed to get it done before, they would wake up. But now that they're a little bit older and I usually get home from work and oftentimes they're at their activities. So it's the first thing I do when they get home. And it probably is a form of decompression, but also I feel so much better. And, in addition to, obviously taking care of patients with cancer, and a lot of my patients are older, I look at like, how can we live well and like longevity and vitality? And I think that movement is the most important thing that we can do.
Yes.
I think if you aren't moving and aren't exercising, I have 70 and 80-year-old patients, and some of them can hop up on the exam table and some of them, there's no, they can't. And I think the biggest difference is even if it's just walking regularly, but to me, I think strength, maintaining muscle mass, we lose muscle mass as we age. Cancer patients lose muscle mass as they go through treatment. So to me, exercise is the thing that keeps me sane, but also just keeps me feeling, if I'm not doing it, I notice a big difference in how I feel.
My nickname at UNC is Zeus. It's kind of, I don't like it, but it's kind of cool because even doing my chemo, I would walk 5 miles a day. And when I felt too weak to do it, I just let my dog pull me because she loved to do that. And I would do my trainer. I'm a cyclist, so I would do my trainer for 30 minutes. And my doctor said, you have to pick one. You can't do both. And I still kept doing both. So, my thing was, if I have a blood cancer and the way that I know to move my lymphatic system is through exercise and movement.
Absolutely.
And I continue that and have continued that. And so you are definitely right and spot on. And so many people, when they're diagnosed with cancer, or even these other modalities, they don't have movement. It's almost like they resign to the fact, I have this, and then that's it. But you have to move. You have to fight. You have to keep fighting and pushing because cancer never stops.
Right.
It's
Well,
working and you think it's not.
I commonly hear from patients, "I have fatigue. What can I do for my fatigue?" And I say, "Keep moving."
Keep moving.
Initially, it may sound counterintuitive, but the less you do, the less you do, right?
That's right.
So if you sit more, you're gonna lose muscle mass, and the thing that used to be easy, like walking upstairs, now becomes harder, or walking out to the mailbox.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think that it's hard initially, but once you make it a habit, and it really needs to be, for me, it's a non-negotiable.
Non
I might have several important things on my to-do list, but I am going to get in some exercise before I start tackling those, because I know that if I just jump to tackling those, you know, it doesn't happen. So it's just, I make movement a non-negotiable.
a common cancer myth that frustrates you.
There's a few things that I hear that, I guess one could be, well, I don't have cancer in my family, so I don't think I need to do my screenings.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned before, most cancer is not genetic. A common cancer myth, I don't know that this is actually a myth necessarily, but you hear commonly people say sugar feeds cancer. And
Yeah, you do.
it's
Yeah.
not that simple. Obviously, all your cells to some extent need sugar, but I will say that a lot of doctors say that's such a myth. Not really. I mean, a diet is a big deal, and the sugar in your diet, what I would say is not a myth, is that your highly processed, high sugar foods with all of the added sugars
Mhm.
actually probably do feed cancer in the sense of, fueling the growth that they need. Sugar that comes naturally along with the fiber and water and antioxidants that you get from fruits,
Mhm.
actually all the studies would indicate that sugar is not feeding cancer. In fact, because you're not having the insulin spike, it's a much slower, gradual increase. It actually probably reduces your cancer. Not probably. Those foods do reduce your cancer risk. So, kind of, I would say a myth that I'm commonly addressing is like, you know, patients that say, "Oh, I mean, I have to cut out all sugar," which isn't necessarily the case. But anyways, does that answer that
That
question?
that answers you're doing amazing. Look, we're talking to Dr. Julia Saylors. We're getting close to the end here. One more question for you. If you were not an oncologist, what
Mhm.
would you be?
It's hard to imagine doing anything else. I don't know. I do love numbers. I think I probably would. I actually, for a short period of time, thought I might want to be a meteorologist. I
Hmm.
love the weather and
Yeah.
live in an area where we get hurricanes, and I can just watch the weather channel, and I'm a little jealous when they're out there and talking about that. So maybe a meteorologist might have been something that would have been pretty fun, and still some science background there. So I don't
Hmm.
know.
All right, we got you. So, look, Dr. Julia, final message to our listeners here. What do you want every cancer fighter and supporter to remember?
I think that it's just important to know that you're not your diagnosis, and you're a whole person, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
And that, our bodies have amazing healing capacity, I believe. And so, my hope is that people, find the strength and in all of those aspects, to help heal in ways that, medicine we can't always measure through medicine. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's healing is such a, it's the whole person, it's the spirit, it's all of that. So I hope people know that once they get a diagnosis, that doesn't define them, it changes them, but a lot of growth and goodness can come out of that and
Yeah,
healing.
you can't underestimate the power of the spirit of the human resolve, right? It's like I get what you're saying. I get what you're putting
Yeah,
down.
I don't know.
Hard to
Yeah,
express it, but
going back to my grandmother, it's not just a tumor. There's so much more. I don't know.
it doesn't define you. Just because you hear those words, you have cancer, doesn't mean that that's the end. That's just the beginning of a different fight, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So how can we find you? Where you at?
Yeah.
What's your Instagram handles, your social media? How can we
Well,
get
if you're a patient, I'm licensed in the state of South Carolina, and I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and I have a practice so I'm seeing patients every day. But as far as just the general cancer prevention and wellness information that I'm putting out there, I would say Instagram's my primary platform. Julia Saylors, MD,
Mhm.
would be the best place to kind of see what information I'm sharing and continuing to learn, hopefully, specifically for cancer patients, but also just for anybody who's, hoping to live their best life.
Thank you so much. Dr.
Yep.
Julia Saylors, we thank you for your time. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope Tigers give Duke everything they hoping for this
Yes.
weekend.
Go Tigers.
All right, you have a blessed day,
Thank
okay?
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.